Gino, to show you how little I understand enlightenment, you're one of the most enlightened people that I know.
Oh, wow.
That wasn't necessarily a compliment.
I understand that.
What is enlightenment?
Well, in the simplest terms, the question is, can you tell the difference between the experience of this, which is coming from your senses, versus what's coming from thought? And tying it to the neurosciences and the perspective that you generally like is really talking about can you tell the difference between acting from presence versus acting from thought, or the relationship between presence and thought? So, for example, if I ask you to stare in my eyes right now, we can hear the sounds and we can see different things, and this is a certain experience. But if I ask you right now, for example, and we can be aware of all this, and you can be aware of how this feels. But now if I ask you something like, for example, what is 17 times 13? What is 17 times?
221 or something.
Yeah, something like. So you usually the eyes move. You go into thought. You go somewhere else, which is arguably thought. It turns out you're either present or you're in thought, but you can't be in both places at the same time. It seems to be kind of a neurological phenomenon that we have by observing eye movement and everything. And so the question is, what are the forces that are motivating action? And so if you can tell the difference between what's coming from thought versus what's coming from presence, and if you can bring yourself fully present, if you can really bring yourself fully present, right here and right now, everything's fine.
So does that mean enlightenment, those who are deeply enlightened have that, but to a very high degree of capability?
What we can talk about related to the development of things, and if you think about life and what life really does and experience really does, is it charges the physiology. And so the question is, can you maintain a highly charged physiology independent of story? So typically for most people, their stories dictate how they feel and the energy in their physiology. But can I reach a high state of energy? And so, for example, if I talk to you like this, and if I look at you like this is going to feel very different from, this is kind of a different, and arguably if I'm like this, it's
totally
lower energy
feeling,
state, and I'm less aware and all of this other stuff. But if I have the energy, I can be present, I can be sensitive to a lot of the little subtle things that are going on, like the eye movements that you have there and everything, and I can be fully aware of all of that. But for most people, it's tied to story. And so the question is, can you maintain a highly charged physiology independent of story and context? And so if you look at the work in peak performance and flow, and if you look at athletes and when you're engaging in a deal, you're very high energy and all of this. But it's tied to context. And so when you're doing that, you're that way. But when you're in the cab, you're kind of discharged, charged, discharged. And most people are charged, discharged, but it gets better. So as you become more experienced, you charge, discharge greater, etc. But then the question is, can you reach escape velocity in this mind-body relationship and maintain a highly charged physiology and realize that the physiology and the energy relates to how I'm breathing, what I'm eating, how much I'm sleeping, etc. And then if I can focus on my physiological health and realize that right here and right now, and act from joy, then the question and the ability for this is, if you're able to become independent of context and independent of story, then you observe the world as it appears, which is very different. And the interesting thing about this is that there aren't that many people that can walk around and actually walk and be like this. Most people, if you walk down the streets or ride the bus, you see them, you can literally see them kind of in their minds and in thought. And so the question, kind of like the Matrix a bit, is can you get people outside of the stories and the behaviors? And
that's the road to enlightenment.
Yeah, that arguably is. And the simplest definition for that I have is, can you tell the difference between the experience, knowing what's coming to your physiology from the experience of the moment versus what's coming from thought? And it's quite radical, right? So like your apartment in New York, for example, right now is just an idea. And it feels very different from the wind blowing here. And so if you can really bring yourself fully present, there's really nothing to worry about, right? And so again, how and why do we do what we do, and how do things emerge, and how do things happen? And it just gives you a very different perspective, because the high energy gives you the awareness, and the independent of context or no mind allows you to just play and act from joy and really explore.